Hello, everyone. We are having a discussion today on Vinland Saga, Book 4, and I'm so excited to be continuing to have these conversations with the one and only Merphy Napier. Hello, Merphy. How are you?
I'm doing great. This is what I've been excited to talk about the most. So I'm so hyped.
Yeah, this is the climax. This
Yes.
is the climax of the first arc, I guess, of Vinland
Mhm.
Saga, Book 4. And it is one heck of a book, I have to say. Just so much happened, so much that these first three books were working toward.
Mhm.
It comes to fruition here in the fourth book, and in such a great way, in such a compelling way. So we have lots to talk about, but should we start at the beginning? And I
Yes.
actually have a question for you.
Okay.
For the beginning, I was wondering, is this normal to have a completely black panel like this in the beginning? Because I didn't know, I thought it was a brilliant thing because it led right into this whole, the atmosphere of the opening. And you have this very dark hall in here, and you have the first time we ever see Swain's face, and
Uh-huh.
he's more than half in shadow as well. So is this kind of I guess an atmosphere setting device to have this entire panel or this whole page to be dark like this, or do they always do that in the beginning of
So
a
I love that you're reading so much into it
yeah,
because because it the manga authors love their character reveal moments.
yeah, yeah.
The answer is no. If you go to the halfway point
I
of
saw
here.
that one there too.
Yep, you've
Yeah,
got one here, and this introduces the next volume. There are two
yeah.
volumes for every one of these books that we're reading. And
Okay,
so you've got it here as well.
yeah.
That just breaks up the volumes.
Okay, it's a lot of
Um,
ink, but okay,
it
yeah.
is, I know, I think about that every time. I'm reading Full Metal Alchemist right now. And
Uh-huh.
between volumes, they'll do like 3 or 4 of those all black pages. And
Oh
I'm just like,
wow.
what?
Okay.
Stop. There's too much.
Wow. But it is such a great atmospheric opening at the same time. Even if, okay, I wasn't quite on about the dark,
It's
the one
okay. Read
page,
into it.
but let's do it anyway. I mean, it's such a great atmospheric opening, I
Yeah.
think. And it reintroduces a lot of these big themes we've been talking about, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. You're absolutely right. I really love that he kind of goes for this almost Tolkien-esque um, ideal of, absolute power corrupts absolutely. The crown
Yeah.
has a will of its own
Oh,
to
that's so good.
to
Yeah.
use power and gain power. And you have this it's this page that I'm looking at right now. You have this isolated panel of him on the throne, this
Yep.
close up of him, and you just see how his power and all that he's been doing has just depleted him. You get this kind of idea of life being sucked out of him. And then you have Canute promising, swearing to himself, well, that's not what's going to happen to him. He's not going to be corrupted by the
Yes.
crown. And it's almost, to me, I read this and I was like, well, way to set yourself up for a corruption arc to declare that this isn't going to happen to you. But it is true that someone being given this much power, you see corruption just historically. You see corruption, or even just you see some level of kind of losing your connection with humanity and with the people that you rule when you gain such absolute power. And I really love that he opened on that.
Yeah, I mean, that is just such a brilliant observation. And there are so many panels. Here's another one with this on page
Yes.
41,
Uh-huh.
where he's explaining the whole thing. It's not me, it's the crown, And
Mm-hmm.
it is, you're so right. I didn't think of that, but you're so right. It is like Tolkien's ring in many ways, isn't it? It's just
Mm-hmm.
such a potent symbol that we see again and again and again, and even as late as page 285. And this is a big time spoiler for the end of it, but you see the crown in a very different context. This is after the most important, panel in the entire 4 books, but there it is again, right? And
Uh-huh.
that's a
Oh,
very potent
isn't
moment.
that visual just stunning?
Oh, it
It's one of my
is stunning.
top panels
Yeah.
in the whole arc.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, just drawing that emphasis of, okay, it's your turn now,
Yeah.
and the impact of it.
Yeah.
Going back to the beginning, though, I really
Yes.
appreciate that right after we have this discussion of the king kind of shifting blame of, no, it's the crown, it controls us, it leads us, and Canute making that promise, I won't be that way.
Mhm.
The very right after, I think it's the very next chapter, you see him being so cold and callous. You see how much he's changed already when he tells Ragnar's brother, "Well, he's dead, he's gone, so anyway,
Yes.
let's move forward," and just not having any sort of care for the impact on him, seeing how much he has chosen not to care anymore about Ragnar's death, and
Yeah.
just the stark change in him as he's getting closer and closer to the crown.
Yes, there is a tragic death of innocence in the
Yeah.
character of Canute here, and it is presented as, in this harsh world, a necessity in order for him to mature and to come into his own and become the great leader that he has the potential to be. But to do that, he has to make the sacrifice, which leads again to that theme of leadership and the sacrifices that a great leader makes in order to be a leader include, in his case, the death of his innocence, the death of his father figure Ragnar. So many things have to happen in order for that potential to be unleashed in him, and he gets it, and he willingly makes these sacrifices to the point where his replacement father figure, even, and again, I keep skipping to the end because it's so powerful, and we'll talk
I get it
in a bigger context, but even to the extent that he himself is able to do away with his replacement father figure at the end, which is of course Askeladd. But we have to talk about that big moment in much more detail. But yeah, there's so much foreshadowed. Again, I find it so brilliant how Yukimura it does this. There's stuff that happens in the very beginning, and then it leads to stuff at the very end, and it's really tying stuff together, and it's beautifully, again, we talked about the visuals here. There's not a word on this page. And it's so powerful.
So powerful.
It's great storytelling right there.
Absolutely.
And just the symbol of the crown and all that it entails, the burden of it, the weight of it, the sacrifices, the death of not just innocence, but in the case of Sweyn, it was the death of empathy and compassion. And is Canute going to be able to do something different from that? There's so much wrapped up here in this scene, and it's all visual.
And there's so much, I think, one thing that I love about this story is how many parallels there are in so many different directions. So much so that it's impossible to really discuss them all, isn't it? But I love the connection of, as we see Thorfinn, who has pushed down so much of himself in order, in this plot of revenge, now we're seeing Canute pushing down so much. Like, you can't convince me that when he told Ragnar's brother, oh, he's dead now, that he didn't feel anything, but he's choosing who he's going to be in these little moments, like we saw with Thorfinn, in those little moments of him betraying that woman that helped him, and him walking away when that woman was raped, and like those little moments that determine who he chooses to be. And we get those little moments with Canute too, don't we?
Absolutely. You mentioned parallels, and I think that's such an important observation. And there's this one sequence of scenes that I think it's so cool how each builds on the other, and each is related to the other. They all involve Askeladd, who is the star of this book in my opinion. As this is Askeladd's, I mean, he's on the cover, appropriately so. And this vision of him as a king with a crown, there it is again, the symbol we've been talking about. It's right on the cover. This is Askeladd's book. So there's a scene with Askeladd and Atli, the one of his men who had, along with his brother, decided to betray Askeladd. And Askeladd lets Atli go. He says,
I actually am again open to that page right now. Is it this one?
Bingo.
Oh my goodness.
So great minds think alike here again. But yeah, I mean, it's such a character building moment for Askeladd, because he's not about, oh, you betrayed me, I'm gonna kill you, and it's nothing. He's like, yeah, I get it, buddy. And you know what, you're not really cut out for this warrior business. Here, take some gold and go have a farm or something. But by the way, if I see you again, I'm gonna kill you. So that's how he feels with that.
Well, and even that, though, I think is so compassionate. Him telling him, by the way, if I see you again, I believe him. I think he would kill him.
Yep.
But I don't think it's because he is issuing command and how dare you, reject it. It's because he really wants what's best for him, and he doesn't want to give him an option of coming back. He wants him to go find a life for himself. And we see that compassion again when he's supposed to have this fight with Thorfinn, and he tells him, wait, let me deal with Bjorn first.
That's the next scene. Yeah, so
yes.
well said.
I'm sure you have a ton to say about that scene.
Oh no, go ahead. I want to hear what you have to say.
No, I want to hear you. I want to hear you talk about
okay.
this because
no,
I felt it. I want your reactions for this whole scene with him and Bjorn.
Oh, it's so, I think you hit the nail on the head when you use the word compassion. And it's so ironic, of course, that he is killing him in that moment, but it is an act of mercy. It is
absolutely.
Compassion. Right. And it's so beautiful because Bjorn says, I just wanted to be your friend. That's all I wanted. And he says, you were my friend.
My only
friend. Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a powerful scene. And you can even see, I think there's so much, again, we're seeing these characters push down so much. Bjorn throughout this entire thing is really talking to him and opening his heart to how much Askeladd meant to him and why he was so loyal to him and all he wanted from him all this time. And Askeladd's not responding to him at first. He's just doing his duty. And it's almost the impression that I get from this scene is him not wanting to have this discussion out loud. And then at the end, just whispering it to him as he dies to let him know how much he meant to him, but only between them and not loud enough that the spectators could see. But it's also an admission to himself because he doesn't want to be tied to this earth. He doesn't want to be tied to people, even though he can't help himself from caring for Bjorn, can't help himself from caring about Thorfinn. That's not what he wants. He wants to be tied to his mission, but he can't help but have to admit to Bjorn in this moment that, yeah, I am tied to you.
Yeah, and what a contrast to his declarations that he hates all Danes and they're all horrible. And then, there was a bond there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I believe him. And that's the thing is like these things are so layered because I do believe you. You do hate all Danes. Your hatred for your father truly does transcend that deep. Yet you can't help yourself from loving the individual.
Beautifully said. Yeah. And again, there's the father theme woven into this yet again, and love and leadership and friendship, and all of it is just so beautifully, in there are these 4 scenes, and they're all with Askeladd. And the next one you already mentioned is the duel with Thorfinn. And that is immediately follows the scene with Bjorn, which is, as you said, an act of mercy and compassion. What happens between Askeladd and Thorfinn is a bit rougher, but it is also Askeladd frustrating. If he's frustrated with Thorfinn because he's you don't learn. You know, here is a rough lesson. You need to use this if you're gonna. And this is a very brutal scene. It's awful the way he's beating on him, and I think he almost at the end kills him. He's talked back from it by Canute, but I think he probably wouldn't have done it anyway. That he has hovering over Thorfinn, but he wants Thorfinn to learn.
Yeah, I think he just wants to get it in his head how like I can do this right now. I can end this.
Yep.
And it's your fault that I can. You should have been able to stop me. Yep. And it's just that hard lesson because he just can't get it through his head. And I think too, a lot of it, this is me jumping ahead a little bit because I really, really, really want to talk about his mom and all that context we got. Yes. But I think that ties back into this as well and into what we're going to talk about at the end too, because he knows that his hatred for the Danes is wrapped up in his hatred towards his father. Yes. And he knows that all-consuming feeling, and he's trying to free Thorfinn from that because, again, so many parallels between them and their quest for, or their motivation in that hatred that they both carry.
So true. And that is the 4th scene, essentially, is Askeladd's flashback, which explains what his father was.
Oh yeah.
The monster that his father was. And and what Askeladd imbibed from both his father and his mother, because he is a combination of the two. And it seems like this is why he is horrible, and yet we love this guy, because he did imbibe a lot from his mother as well. His dream of a better world comes from his mother, whereas his brutality comes from his father. And I think there's a part of him that even hates himself, because he probably does recognize some of his father in himself as well.
Yeah, and it's through this flashback that we get his true mission, and that's that he wants to have a world that he couldn't give to his mom, that his mom didn't have, that safety and that protection. And which is really funny, because that's essentially Canut's goal too, after he makes after he has that switch. And in the next arc, you'll see more progress on that goal. It just always comes back around, but we're not talking about the next arc.
We will be someday, I hope.
Yes.
But no, you're so right, because it happens in this book where Askeladd hands over the torch to Canute in the most potent, brilliant scene of all 4 books, where they both understand what they're doing, and Canute has to kill Askeladd. But in that act of killing Askeladd, he is taking up the torch of this dream of building a world that is better, of building a world with stability, where peace is possible. And Canute did achieve that. I mean, he became a great, capable king. So you had this moment of Askeladd handing over his dream in the act of sacrificing himself. It's really something.
I know.
And it's also, I think, the flashback with the father and the mother introduces, or it re-emphasizes a very important theme in here, which we haven't talked about a ton yet, which is slavery, thraldom. It's part of the broader issue of suffering and pain in this world, but it's a very potent example of suffering. It's the slavery, and it's another foreshadowing, how brilliant, of what happens at the very end of this with of course Thorphin. So it's just, wow, I just amazed at how many things he ties together so well here. But yeah, it's just brilliant. And then we get the assassination attempt, which leads into the big scene at the end, right? What did you make of all the machinations going on, where it seems to be a battle of wits almost between Sweyn Forkbeard and Askeladd, who is guiding Canute to not only take his dream, but to replace his father?
Sorry, can you tell me where exactly you are?
Oh, sure. So the first bit is when they arrive in York, and there's the assassination attempt.
That assassination.
I
jumped to the end.
With the double. When they put the woman
double
in his place, and that is very has an impact on poor Canute, who realizes this woman died essentially as a decoy for me. And he says, don't ever do that again, okay? Because it affects him. I mean, we can see that he has compassion.
Yes, and we see this I guess we see it kind of subtly in this arc, how much, but there are plenty of scenes that I won't put on screen because I don't want YouTube to demonetize you. But there are several scenes that kind of show how much of an object slaves really are in people's eyes, and how they really just don't have any value of life, and in their minds they didn't do anything wrong. They were serving a greater purpose, and she was a slave. What does it matter, and I love this scene for a lot of reasons, but for the character of Canute, I love this scene because we just at the beginning of this book, we saw how hardened he's become and how callous he's become and how he's losing that softness to him, but it's forced back to the surface here when he sees how this person died in his place and how she didn't get an honorable death. She didn't get any sort of care, and that upset him. That hurt him to see that. And it's such an important scene for him as a character, that you see that that isn't lost on him. His compassion hasn't been erased from him in his quest for leadership and hardness.
So true. Yeah. And just love, and the compassion theme is brought in again with Leif, the reappearance of Leif Erikson.
One of my favorite characters.
Yeah, so beautiful how this old man is trying you can see he feels responsible, but it's
Oh
also
yeah.
he is wanting so much for Thorfinn to find him and to make life okay for him, to give him compassion.
Mm-hmm.
It's just such a powerful thing. And again, it's he's trying to find. He believes that Thorfinn has been made into a slave, and he's trying to track him down and going to such lengths.
And we
And
even get a small indication of the parallel of him with
Yep.
the way that slave woman was treated, and how he's just sickened by the way slaves are treated.
Yeah. Yep.
Sorry, go ahead. I cut you
No,
off.
no, you're so right. And it's just so, I'm continually astonished at how brilliantly done this is.
Yeah, those little moments.
Yeah, those little moments that reinforce these big themes and that are foreshadowing or tied together with these bigger moments later on. And of course, the biggest moment really happens here near the end, where you have it's Wales or it's Canute. And that whole thing begins really pretty early. It's drawn out, but you don't realize it because it just goes so fast. It's a real page turner. But it begins on page 213 with this very ominous image of the sword with the snake entwining it, introducing the violence and the treachery and everything that is to come. I mean, the snake being such a, it's a universal symbol. So of all, of sin and all kinds of other things in there. So, and just where it leads is absolutely amazing. I mean, this whole climax of this first arc is absolutely brilliant stuff.
Oh, I completely agree. I completely agree. And I don't know, did you expect Askeladd to die at the end of this arc? Could you see that coming pretty well?
Two things I did not see coming. One was Askeladd's death. Two was the moment when he cuts off Swain's head, because the real Swain Forkbeard actually died after falling off a horse.
Oh, really?
Just a few weeks after conquering England, actually. He died, fell off a horse and died. That's what we think. And
that's what we think. But now we know the truth.
Now we know. Yeah, this is a much more compelling ending, I think. Much more interesting. I love what Yukimura does here, actually. Yeah, I'm not a stickler for history or anything, so I think it's brilliant that he has Askeladd in that moment where he's been given this decision: Canute or Wales by Swain. You got to sacrifice one or the other. And Askeladd finds a way out, but it involves sacrificing himself, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that he came into this not anticipating that, not wanting to do it, having every intention of continuing on the path that he was on, continuing to influence Canute and serve him and all that jazz. But at the end of the day, his mission was far greater than he was, which again, it's that fixation that Thorfinn also has, and that Askeladd sees in him, but it's not even for a noble cause in Thorfinn's case. But I think that Askeladd sees so much of himself in Thorfinn, which is why he's trying to counsel him so hard. But yes, the scene when he's going over in his mind all his options, and you can see all this dialogue in his head, figuring it out, which we've seen on display so many times before this, and then finally realizing what he has to do. And I loved that Canute was fully aware when he started going berserk, when he started losing it. What was the word that they used?
Yeah, then he understood that Askeladd was feigning this whole thing. Like, he's pretending to be mad in order to disconnect himself from Canute. Canute understood, okay, I've got to do this. I've got to kill Askeladd in order to complete this bit of theater and seize the reins. And he does indeed do that. You see that with Floki tries to assert control, and Canute says, no, I'm in charge now.
Well, and I think it's notable too that Canute told Thorfinn or Thorkel when Thorkel was like, "Oh, good, fight," and Thorfinn said, "Not yet," because he's aware of what's happening, and he knows that Askeladd is saving Canute as well as saving Wales. But then he turns to Thorkel and he says, "Okay, now you can finish him." And Thorkel then understands, and he's like, "This one's you." Sits down, starts eating. He's like, "You do it. You kill your dog." And it's because he was fully aware of what Canute had to be in that moment in order to be able to do what Askeladd needed of him, in order to be able to lead his country.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And yeah, so Thorkel in that moment takes over the reins as the mentor figure,
He
as
does.
as
And
the
you said
father.
historically he did.
Apparently, yeah, there are references to Thorkel actually teaching Canute at some point, and so we're not 100% sure, but it seems likely enough. At least there are stories of that. So it seems like the appropriate moment, and I love how Yukimura does this. He just brings that in there. He's done his homework. He's really done his homework, and he saw the moment, the right moment to bring Thorkel into the position of mentor figure here,
right,
with the demise of Askeladd.
right.
But it's so ironic too that that Swain had demanded, "Bring me Canute's head," and of course the ending that we get is his own head, with the crown flying off of it and the transfer of everything there. Just so many things coming into this scene.
I also love that Canute, his final blow was so shallow, and yes, it was in the heart, but it was such a weak, execution. And Askeladd asking him, "Is that all you got?" And then telling him, "Good job." And I love that. Oh man, what a beautiful passing the torch that Askeladd did of like, okay, it was good enough. And then just taking his fall. Oh, it was well done. That was what he said.
And knowing full well that Canute would be carrying on that dream as well.
Right. Yeah. Right. Absolutely. And then we have the fallout with Thorfinn.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Poor Thorfinn,
Yeah.
And it's this, no, you can't do this to me because I was supposed to kill him. And no, you can't do this because he's my father, simultaneously.
Yeah. He's my whole life.
He's my purpose. He's my meaning.
He's everything. Yeah, he is everything that I've centered my life around. What am I supposed to do from here? And I love that Askeladd saw that in him and said, "You haven't even thought about what your life would look like after this."
Yeah.
And the fact that, I don't know if you remember this, but Floki, how do you say his name?
I think Floki. Yeah.
Floki. Yeah. He was the one that issued Askeladd to kill Thors. Do you remember that from the beginning?
Yeah, in the first place. Yeah.
Yeah. And Floki was standing right there. Askeladd could have easily said, "Don't worry, your vengeance can still be fulfilled." Right there.
Great point. Great point.
Because he didn't want he didn't want Thorfinn to fulfill his vengeance. He wanted him to let it go. He wanted him to move on and have a life, because he hasn't up to this point.
Oh, what a great point. Yeah, he could have easily done that. You're right. Yeah.
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 Oh man, I love that he challenged him. Oh, here it is. Oh, move on, Thorfinn. Don't hang on to this petty Do you swear on your channel?
Oh, you can. Go ahead. Yeah.
To this petty bullshit your entire life. You've got to move on. Go further. You are the son of Thors, so venture beyond the world he saw. That is your true battle. And he tells him, "Be a true warrior, son of Thors." That's so powerful. That is the final words of someone who cared, who truly cared for someone.
It's an act of love, in fact. And you said it beautifully, that he's trying to steer Thorfinn toward a better life, toward a life of love and empathy rather than vengeance and hatred. Yeah. And you have that vision of a better world, which is the uber theme again of, I assume, Vinland Saga, is seeking a world without suffering and pain and the hierarchies that we created with slavery and everything else. It's just such a great thing that he's done here.
What an incredible ending. I truly can't think of a better ending than this one.
Yeah, and of course it does continue the story. We still have a chunk of story after, which is what happens, the aftermath for Thorfinn specifically, and the theme that was foreshadowed so well throughout this, and even earlier. If you look back, I'm sure that Yukimura has hints of it earlier, but he's a slave now as a result of giving the wound to Canute, and Canute actually acts with mercy and says, no, do not kill him, but there has to be a consequence, which is that he's sold into slavery. And this is the beginning, obviously, of now what happens next, but it's the beginning of the next arc. I assume it's sort of an introduction, a hook into, the story continues. It's a satisfying ending with Askeladd's death, and his attempt to steer Thorfinn the right way, but to hand off his dream to Canute.
He really was steering both the boys
True.
in that in his final.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
You're so right. And you made me think of just how much these two boys are about the same age, and there's such contrasts, aren't they?
Oh yeah.
There's a lot they have in common, but they're also such contrasts. There are father-son themes with both. They both relate to Askeladd.
Yes.
But you have the one, Canute, who has asserted control over his destiny, and the other, Thorfinn, who has been that's all been taken away from him. He's become a slave. So they've become king and slave now.
Yes.
So they're on very different planes at the end of all of this, aren't they?
Absolutely. And that will continue. But I wanted to mention too, I mentioned that a big part of the storytelling in this is in people's eyes, a big part of what we see of them as characters. And after Thorfinn lets go of Askeladd, drops his body and turns, and we see in his eyes something that we've never seen up to this point in the story.
That look has never been on his face before. Never.
No, his eyes have never looked like that. He has always had that very hard look. And you can truly see that Askeladd was absolutely right. He has no idea what to do and where to go from here, because everything in his life was just lost.
Wow.
And it's another one of those wordless panels that just says so much.
It does indeed. Such a great example of just how awesome this storytelling can be, and how the visuals are such a big part of that. Yeah, you're so right about that look on his face, just in that one panel.
Yeah. So we see.
After, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to reinforce what you said about the parallels between Thorfinn and Canute, and how one is sinking to the floor while the other one is rising up.
He's rising to the crown. Yeah.
Isn't that wild?
It is crazy. And to reinforce what you were saying about the eyes, afterwards, in the next, when he's a slave, the look on his eyes is just dead. That's a different look too. We're used to Thorfinn looking angry, and then you get that look of pure pain and sorrow, and then afterwards he looks dead. His eyes are dead in the next section. Like all of his purpose has been taken away with.
It really has.
Yeah.
He drops the symbol of his vengeance.
Yes.
The thing that he took up in order to seek out this vengeance, he drops it in the end.
Another brilliant panel. Look at that.
It's incredible. The storytelling on this level is so incredible.
It speaks volumes. It really
does.
Yeah.
Also, I was so impressed with you a second ago. I'm not impressed anymore, but I was impressed about 5 seconds ago, because I was like, oh my goodness, how did you read so much more into this than me? Because you're talking about, he became a slave, and of course he had the consequences. And I was like, I didn't notice any of that. And then I forgot that this is the final panel of this arc. And this book actually gives us the first 2 chapters of the next.
Is that what they did? I'm such a genius.
Yeah, I know. I was like, how did he read that much? There must have been one line that he just really dug into. So the black page was the end of this volume. And
I'm sorry. I didn't realize
the beginning of the next arc.
Oops. I just thought, these are, I thought these are nice colored pictures. I wonder why they're there.
Oh, that's so fun. No, that's my fault. I should have warned you, because my patrons warned me, and that's why I knew where to stop. I probably wouldn't have even known. So that's on me. But yeah,
it's so
you've
funny.
Now read the beginning of the next arc. So we won't discuss those. We'll wait until our next discussion to get into those.
Yeah, we'll do that. But yeah, I just blissfully kept reading. That's so funny.
You got a taste of some of the themes that we're about to hit on. Yeah, a lot of the stuff that you said about slavery, I was really pinching my lips closed tight, because when you were talking about themes of slavery and digging into like all that, and I was just thinking, are we digging into it in the next one? And you really saw that just in these 2 chapters. You really saw how much we're going to dig into the other side of war, the other side of consequences of war. And it's an incredible arc, Philip. You are gonna love it.
I'm so excited to read it and to talk about it with you, Merphy. And I said it before, but I really want to just emphasize how thankful I am to you for recommending Vinland Saga to me, because I'm really, really enjoying this, and I'm
I'm
feeling
so glad you are.
feeling it right here. You know, it's so powerful. And also thank you for discussing
Oh yeah, I've loved it.
these with me. I'm very grateful to you for that, because just as we're talking, I get more and more excited, and I get some insights, and it's just fun learning from you. So thank you
Oh
so
yeah.
much.
Wow, yeah, of course. I've loved it too. I feel like I've been able to flesh out a lot of my thoughts as well, because you've brought so many things that I haven't considered to the table, and being able to chat about it, especially since with my video on the first arc, was more of a condensed, let's discuss quickly. So being able to dig into the details like this has been very, very satisfying for me.
Yeah, this is the best thing about BookTube, isn't it? Yeah.
It is being able to actually make a discussion of a solo thing. But I did want to ask you really quick before we wrap it up.
Sure.
As a historian and as someone who knew these stories and has all the context, I'm really curious. I was hoping that you would enjoy it, but I'm curious how that has influenced your read on this just as a whole.
Yeah, I feel that I have immense respect for Yukimura, because he steeped himself in the history. And by the way, I'm a medievalist, not so much a historian as, although I read a lot of history too, but I'm a literature professor. So my emphasis is on the literature. So for me, the storytelling comes first. And I want to see a great story told. And I love that he steeped himself, but I also love that he's taken liberties, that he does things that are not part of the actual history. That, I mean, the biggest example for me is where he weaves in all the stuff about King Arthur and Artorias and the legacy of the Romans and all that. And that's really, it's not quite appropriate if we're going to be very strict about, it's anachronous, but I love what he does there, because it makes it really great storytelling. What it achieves, for example, is it allows him to review the ways in which we human beings have inflicted pain and suffering on each other for generations and generations and generations. And he embodies that in the character of Askeladd, whom he gives this past of being, at least partly, he identifies with his Welsh side, and he understands what happened to the native Celtic, the Britons, when the Angles and the Saxons came and did what the Vikings later did to the Angles and the Saxons. And it's just this relentless, chronicle of human beings doing horrible things to each other. And how do we find compassion? How do we find meaning? How do we find love in all of this? So he weaves a wonderful story together out of the strands of history, and he takes liberties in order to make the story that much better. So I absolutely love it. So for me, he's done just the right thing. And I really appreciate how well versed he made himself before weaving this tale. And I believe that, I obviously can't speak for him, but I'm sure that the ideas were firing while he was doing his research and while he was writing, and all these things sort of came together. And that's a cool thing about storytelling is sometimes the story carries you along with it too. And it takes you places where you might not have realized you intended in the first place. But so I'm 100% on board with what he's doing here.
Good. Oh, I'm so glad. I really felt confident that you would like it, that you would appreciate it. I feel like this has been a manga that I actually picked this up because my brother's really into Vikings and Iceland and all that.
Oh, cool.
And I was like, ooh, this could be his gateway to manga. And I picked it up so I could discuss it with him. And then he refused to read it.
Oh no.
and I didn't expect to like it that much. It was for my brother. And it's ended up being such an incredible story for me. So thank you to my brother. Passively.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you loved it. And now I finally do have someone to really dig into and discuss. You are now my honorary brother.
Oh, well, I am happy to serve in that capacity. I'm delighted to, Merphy. So thank you so much again. And thank you everyone for watching this, and to be continued. I will be ordering the next arc and reading, and we'll get together again, I hope, to discuss it.
Absolutely. 100%.
All right. Fantastic. All right, then. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.